Hello, this video is on section 2.3, which is titled Solving Multi-Step Equations, and the learning target for this that you're going to be copying down on your learning target sheet is to solve multi-step equations with one variable. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to touch on before we get into the lesson is what are like terms. So right here I've written down a few terms separated by commas in order to determine which ones are alike or which ones are similar to each other. Is you see if there is a variable within any of them, and if variables are identical, then it is a like term. So this 12y is a like term with this 11y right here. So those two are considered like terms because they both have a y. Then looking at the other ones, let's say this x, there is no other term in here that has the same variable, so it doesn't have any like terms, it's by itself. And same thing with this z, there's no other terms that are like it that are the same, so they stay on their own. The other two terms are an 8 and a -3, and since those are just constants, they don't have any variables, those are considered like terms. So if you don't have any variables within the numbers, you can't combine those because those are like terms. So if you go down here to combining the two like terms, you have a 12y and an 11y. Now since you don't see any signs in front of them, you have to assume that they are both positive. And combining the two like terms, you keep the term the same degree or the same exponent that it is, so it's just 1y. You don't add them together and be y squared. And then you just add the numbers in front. 12 plus 11 is 23y. And then the other two terms that you have are an 8 and a -3. 8 and a -3. So combining those two together will give you a 5. Okay, so it's very important for you to determine what are the like terms and which ones you can combine together to simplify it a bit easier. And the next thing we're going to get into is something that's called the distributive property. Now the distributive property is if you have some number or term that is being multiplied by a sum or a subtraction on the inside and it's got a parentheses. The big indicator that you will see in distributive property are these two parentheses and if it's being multiplied on the outside. So the way you can simplify these in the distributive property is that you take the term on the outside and you multiply it by each of the terms that are on the inside of the parentheses. So the first thing you multiply is 4 times 2x, 4 times 2x, and that's going to equal 8x. 4 times 2 is 8, and you keep the x as the same like term. Then the next thing you go on to is a 4 times a positive 10. 4 times 10 is equal to 40. And you keep the same sign all the way down through, and this is the simplification using the distributive property, 8x plus 40. So taking the term on the outside and multiplying it by everything in there. Now the last thing I want to go through before I end the video is combining fractions that have different denominators. So let's say we have 3 over 4 minus 1/3. You cannot subtract these because your denominators down here are not the same. The only way you can add or subtract fractions is if the denominators are the same. So we got to think of a way to multiply by some factors that's going to get us to have the same denominator. Well, I think the least common denominator, or LCD, is what I may say it in my videos, least common denominator, is the factor that is the lowest number that includes each of these in factors. And the easiest one to get to is just multiplying these two numbers together. So 4 times 3 is going to give us 12. So that's what we need to get our denominator or our fraction to be in both of these. So in order to go from a 4 to a 12, we have to multiply it by 3. Then whatever we do on the bottom down here, we have to do the exact same thing up top, because that way it's equal to itself. Then looking at the other fraction, in order to go from a 3 to a 12, we had to multiply by 4. then we have to do the exact same thing on top again. So now combining all these together, 3 times 3 is equal to 9, 4 times 3 is equal to 12, 1 times 4 is 4, and 3 times 4 is 12. Now we have the exact same denominator, or 12, and we can combine these together. So 9 minus 4 is equal to 5. Okay, so that's just a few things to get kind of a review back into it before we do some examples in class. But again, this learning target is going to be what you're going to copy down into your learning target sheet that I passed out, and some of these notes are going to be helpful in order creating your own question and your own answer to that question. But we'll get the assignment going in class after you watch this video. So yeah, thank you.